Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today we're following in the footsteps of Theseus, entering into the ancient labyrinth, but not in search of minotaurs. Today we're going after evil ogres in the game Heroes of the Maze. Heroes of the Maze was produced by Waddingtons in 1991 and is a game for 2 to 4 players aged 7 and up. It's one of those few games that doesn't actually feature the game board or the playing pieces themselves on the front cover. Instead, it's got this lovely piece of artwork which would fire kids' imaginations and make them want to buy the game, or at least pester their parents to get them to buy the game. In that way, it reminds me a lot of cheesy horror movies from the 80s, when you used to go into the video rental shop and see row upon row of fabulous artwork that really fired your imagination, made you want to watch the film, even if it's an 18 and you couldn't actually see it. As you'll see later on, although this is pretty much what happens in the game, the troll does not really look like this, and the warriors are not quite as heroic. If we want to see the actual game board itself, we're going to have to turn over. On the back, we've got Heroes of the Maze, enter at your peril. Get ready to move your adventurer to his entrance to the centre. You've scored a 2. Move the walls 1 space and proceed as far as you can. Now move the walls again and see a new path appear.
Beware, all you adventurers who dare to enter my kingdom in search of the treasure. I, the evil ogre, will be lurking silently in the shadows of the magical maze, ready to pounce. You must get to the centre and challenge me to take control. If you win, 3 precious rings could be yours, and you will be the hero of the maze. If you lose, you could be lost in the maze forever.
Here we have our playing pieces, and obviously you've got your green, blue, red and yellow, and these are your adventurers who are going to be entering into the maze in search of treasure. In the middle here, this is your evil ogre, and he's going to be guarding the treasure, the rings at the centre of the maze. We'll talk more about him and what he actually can do later on. Now, I really like the sculpt on these guys. They've put a lot of effort into this. He's got a shield with a dragon, or I suppose it's more of a wyvern since it's only got 2 legs instead of 4. He's got his padded leather armoured jacket here with studs in it, his belt. He's got his sword here in order to go and tackle that evil ogre. He's got his long flowing hair and quite a stern look on his face. And the back's nice and detailed as well. He's got some patternation on the back of his leather coat there, his scabbard for his sword, and his shield's even got the strap going round the back of his arm. They put some really nice detail into these, and they're really nice playing pieces. Now, the ogre, on the other hand, is a different story. What is this pose about? I mean, look at his arms. His arms are almost coming out the side of his head. It's one of the most awkward poses I think I've ever seen in a playing piece.
Here, what are you doing in my maze? You're not getting any of my rings, go!
They've gone for detail. He's got some nice hairy, shaggy fur on the front there, and his teeth are looking good, and some rope bindings round his feet. But it's just a terrible pose. And his butt crack goes all the way up his back. I don't think I've seen such a big butt since Slimer in the Ghostbusters. This guy is just, they could have done a lot better with this evil ogre, I think. He kind of lets it down a little bit. The game uses 3 different 6-sided dice. This is obviously your normal 1 to 6 die. And then these 2 are obviously 2 different colours, but they've got the same things on them. And they've got 2 shields, they've got 2 swords, and there's 2 sides where they are blank, and those will be used for your combat within the game. And these are the rings that you're trying to collect during the game. These are guarded by the evil ogre in the middle of the maze, and each player is trying to get 3 of these. They're nicely sculpted. Each one features a dragon on there, as well as the jewel on the top. problem with these, unfortunately, is that because of this break at the bottom here, and because of this kind of metallic gold plastic that they're made from, these can be quite fragile, so be careful that you don't break these. The game board itself is this beautiful piece of engineering. I absolutely love this. It's three-dimensional and it's got this lovely moving mechanism so that you can change the maze around. It's gimmicky, but I love it. It's great. You've got your 4 archways here where your player pieces go onto the colour sticker that matches the colour of the player, and the player has got to move to the sticker on the board which is on the opposite side of the maze from where they start. In the middle of the maze there's this moat, and that's where our treasure goes, the rings. That stays in there, and that is guarded by the evil ogre who stands on the rock in the middle. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the object of this game is to collect 3 gold rings. Now there's a few different ways you can do that, but the first way, what we need to do to start the game, is to try to move our adventurer through the maze to his coloured centre spot, where he can take on the ogre in a duel in order to win a ring. Now for this example I'm going to use blue as my player piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is roll, and I've got a 4 there. Now the 4 does not tell me how many places I can move, but rather how many times I can move the maze. So because I've got a 4, that means that I can move this either to the left or to the right 4 times, and they don't all have to be at the same time. Now I'm starting off here, I can't move because there's a wall in front of me, so I'm going to have to use one of my 4 in order to move this. So I can choose either way. I'm going to move it this way. 1. Now that I've opened up a space. Now that I've opened up a space, I can now start moving through the maze in any direction I want, as long as I don't jump over a wall here. And I can stop at any point, but I'm going to go around here. So that's, I've used up 1. So now I'm going to turn it again. 2. 3. And now again, I can move as far as I want and stop wherever I want. And I've got 1 more move left. So I'm going to go 4. I could stay there or I could move back. I'm going to stay there just now. And that's the end of my go. It would then obviously be the next player's turn and they're going to try and move. So let's go for red just now. That's a 6, so that's a good roll. So I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to stay where I am there because I'm nearly at this point, but I can't get onto it because of this wall. I'm going to ignore the yellow and the green just now and just go for red and blue. So if it's the blue players go next, that's a 5. That's a good one. So let's go 1, 2, 3, and now I'm on to my blue coloured spot. And from here, my blue player can now take on the ogre in order to try and win a gold ring. Now the first thing that we have to do in this duel, according to the rules, is turn the ogre's back on the adventurer. I don't think this is very fair. The poor ogre is going to get stabbed in the back. It's not very heroic for the adventurer to be attacking something when its back is turned to it, and the poor adventurer is getting an eyeful of the ogre's gigantic butt. So the adventurer takes one of the dueling dice and rolls it to see what he gets. Now that's nothing, so that means that it's a draw. Also, if you got a shield, that would also mean that it was a draw, and that means that because it's a draw, it then goes on to being the ogre's turn. If it was a sword, that means that the adventurer has won and defeated the ogre. So because that was a draw, the ogre then turns around and it's his go to attack the adventurer. I'm going to use a different coloured dice for this, but it's not strictly necessary. You can use either one. So now the adventurer is going to defend himself against the ogre. Now that's a sword. Now that means that the adventurer has successfully defended himself and can go back to attacking the ogre again. If it is a shield, that again is a successful defense. If it's a blank side, that means that the ogre has won and it stays where it is, and the adventurer gets sent back to his archway at the start again and his turn's over. But because he successfully defended himself, he goes back to attacking, and we turn the ogre round again to show his giant butt crack. It's now the adventurer's go to attack, and he's got a shield, so that means it's a draw. So then the ogre turns round, and now it's the ogre's turn to attack. And the adventurer has got a shield, so he's successfully defended himself against the ogre, and so we go back to attacking the ogre again. For the adventurer's attack roll, he's got a sword, so that means that he has finally won. Because the blue adventurer has now defeated the ogre, he gets to take a gold ring for himself, and the ogre gets placed onto the blue adventurer's spot, and the blue adventurer takes the ogre's spot on the rock. The blue player's adventurer now stays here, and he now controls the movement of the ogre. Now that the blue player controls the ogre, the blue player will roll the dice and use that to move the maze so that he can move the ogre through the maze in order to stand next to another player, so that the ogre can then battle the other player. If the ogre wins and beats the other player, he gets another gold ring for his collection, and the player has to go back to their arch to start again. But if the ogre loses, the player stays where he is, and the ogre has to go back to the controlling player's arch. If the ogre is taking on another player, the other player has to roll one of the battle die in order to defend himself. If he gets a blank surface and is not able to defend himself, the ogre wins, gets a gold ring, and he goes back to his start. If he gets a shield or a sword, then he successfully defends himself, and it goes on to the adventurer's attack. When it's the adventurer's turn to attack the ogre, if he gets a blank or a shield, then that's a draw, and it goes back to then the ogre's go. If he gets a sword, then the adventurer wins, and he stays where he is, and the ogre goes back to the start. Throughout the game, as well as the ogre challenging adventurers, adventurers can also move through the maze and challenge the ogre. Now if that happens, the adventurer has to roll a dueling dice again. If they get a sword, they win, they stay where they are, and the ogre gets put back to the controller's arch. But if they get a shield or a blank space, then it's a draw, and it's the turn for the ogre to attack back. The adventurer has to defend himself, so if he throws a sword or a shield, then he's successfully defended himself and the fight continues. But if he throws a blank space, then the ogre wins and the adventurer has to go back to his starting space. And the reason why an adventurer might want to attack the ogre is because you can't actually move past the ogre in the maze. He acts as a blocker. So you might want to get rid of him by sending him back to the beginning. Of course, while all of this is going on, any other player on their turn, once they've rolled and been able to move the maze and move through it, if they manage to get through the maze to the centre, they can then take on the player at the middle of the maze. To do that, Both players have to take a battle dice each, and they roll at the same time. Now, depending on how they land, if one person gets a sword and the other person gets anything other than a sword, the one with the sword wins. Any other combination is going to mean that the battle has to just continue. So you're looking for one sword and something that's not a sword, and then that player wins. If this person here wins, the yellow player, then they will take the blue player's place. The blue player will have to go back to his arch to start again, and the yellow player is now in control of the ogre, who has to go in front of that yellow player's arch to start off. If this player loses, then the blue player continues to stay there, and the yellow player has to move back to his arch to start again. Thankfully, there's a summary of the duels and what dice rolls you're looking for on the back of the instructions. So if you're getting yourself a copy of this game, make sure it comes with instructions, because this comes in really, really handy so that you know what you're trying to do. You're probably going to find yourself having to refer to this quite a lot throughout the game, because otherwise you're just going to get confused. It's a good game and well worth picking up. We played this recently with a couple of friends who were over, and they really enjoyed it too. The problem is the rolling with the dice in order to do all of the battles to try and get rings is really, really tedious. You have to look up the rules to see exactly what you're looking for, and it swaps back and forward each time. And it's just, if you don't get a sword or what you're looking for, then you're rolling again and again and again and again and again, and it's just the same person rolling each time. It's not a good game mechanic. What we ended up doing once the ogre was in play was using the same rules as if it was an adventurer fighting an adventurer in the centre of the maze whenever the ogre was attacking or defending against somebody. So whenever the ogre was next to somebody, each person would take a dice and roll against each other at the same time, and whoever got the sword would win. Now this does change the odds of winning slightly, however it does make each battle far more interesting because you've got that head-to-head competition with somebody else, and it made it far more fun and much better. So the dice mechanics, not great, but the maze, I love this thing. I love any game where you can actually change the pathway around it. Is fantastic. I love that kind of thing. Curse of the Idol, for instance, where you can move the cogs, or the classic Labyrinth. Anything with moving board, where the board changes and it's unpredictable, that's great. And the fact that it's plastic and three-dimensional, I know it's a gimmick, but I love this. It's good fun. So definitely worth picking up. If you see it around, grab it. Until next time, this is Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.